live a little bit earlier than usual this time for the live stream. Just want to make sure we can get through the entire player pool, everything we need to touch on. But of course, this is our weekly DFS live stream where we're going to go through all of our projections, any injury updates, ownership, pretty much everything you guys need to know. And of course, go over any questions that you have. So let's go ahead, get some lines together. Hopefully everyone has their coffee ready, is fully caffeinated, ready to go in and get into these lineups. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for you guys, and we're going to hop into the quarterbacks. So at quarterback, obviously this is a little bit of a more condensed slate. So you're going to see higher ownership across the board. That's obviously just a byproduct of the condensed slate, less players in the pool, hence more ownership per player. But particularly towards the top of the board this week, you can see we have a couple guys over 10% ownership. These guys include Kirk Cousins, Justin Herbert, and Tom Brady, and a handful of guys in that 7 to 5 range. So I'm really going to have to try and pick our spots this week. Not going to be able to play everyone at the top of the board. The most popular of all of them is going to be Tom Brady there at $7,600. If you run any type of optimizer, the first lineup that it's going to build is going to be Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, and probably Rob Gronkowski in the same lineup as a stack. Then filling in with a lot of the other value options and probably a stud running back, that kind of thing. I don't hate that type of build. I am using Tom Brady on the slate. I'm just not using Chris Godwin. I'm trying to get a little bit different. Chris Godwin is by far the most popular player on that team. How I'm utilizing Tom Brady is with Mike Evans, who I've already talked about plenty of my content here on the channel this week. I'm also using Rob Gronkowski in that same type of stack. So you really got to make sure, you're taking ownership into mind with some of these guys. If you're playing single entry or a smaller field contest, don't worry about it. Go ahead and go and play Chris Godwin. Does project for higher points per dollar, is a little bit cheaper than somebody like a Mike Evans. That's why he's going in the optimizer build. That's why the computer's going ahead and spitting him out. But in terms of a GPP play, I think pairing him up with Mike Evans makes a little bit more sense. Jalen Hurts, also somebody I talked about during my core plays video earlier on this week. Somebody who has a good matchup against the Giants team. In my first builds this morning, I didn't have a ton of them. I had right around 5 or 6%, which is actually a little bit less than the field. But I think it's important to have them in your pool. The only reason I wasn't getting a ton of them is that stacking him's a little bit tough, right? He's not necessarily the best passer of the football, tends to get a lot of his fantasy points via the rush. So Jalen Hurts, he's in my player pool. I'm just not a huge fan of using him in stacks. Excuse me, guys. Next up, we have Matthew Stafford there at $7,100, and I'm going to go ahead and lump these next two together. Stafford and Rodgers are really high upside plays. Really the only quarterbacks that aren't garnering that ownership I was talking about before. You can see everyone else priced above, let's see, $6,300, does have over 5% ownership, but these two don't. And it's a little bit surprising. I mean, obviously, both these defenses have been stout to this point of the year. The Vegas over-under is a little bit lower than some of the other games. I think that's really driving a lot of the ownership here. But in reality, we know that these two teams are capable of going out there and putting up points in bunches. I definitely could see a fact where this game is a shootout rather than it being a lower scoring game. I think more often than not, it might be a little bit lower scoring. But when you're dealing with GPPs, when you're trying to find that upside, they have more than enough of a ceiling. So I like going to both of them there. You can see Stafford's there at 4.1% ownership. We have Rodgers at 3.5. Either option that you're going to, you have great stacking options. I mean, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, mid-range options like a Van Jefferson Jr., Marcus Valdes-Scantling. You could go to tight end. You have Higbee. I guess Mercedes Lewis might not be the best stacking option, but you still have some wide receivers over there in Green Bay to use. And a lot of people are making, a huge deal about the foot injury that you have with Rodgers. Look at his numbers last time out. He looked great. Didn't really seem to be hampering all too much. So I'm not worried about it. Justin Herbert is somebody who actually ended up being in my pool. Wasn't sure whether I was going to have enough allocation to be able to take him. I left him as a blank. If he ended up in my pool, lovely. If not, whatever. I really like some of the stacking options just because of Jared Cook. Super cheap, which means we can spend up for Mike Williams, go to a Keenan Allen, that type of thing. It's still spend up at other positions. So liked that stack a whole lot, particularly the optimizer. Was really spitting him out a lot more than I would have expected. But the guy that I have a ton of ownership to this guy, and I'm a Steeler fan. I'll go ahead and put that out there. And I still have, I think, Joe Burrow let me go ahead and double check, just to make sure I'm not giving any false information. Yeah, Joe Burrow is my top owned quarterback as of right now. So I have him projected out as a very nice points per dollar play, also a very high ceiling against the Steelers. Not only have they been horrible against the pass this year, ranking as the 30th ranked team in the whole NFL, they are also without Joe Hayden this week. They're getting TJ Watt back, same thing with Minka Fitzpatrick, but both of them have limited practice time, really aren't going to be running at 100% efficiency. So I do expect them to go out and pretty much score with ease. I'm not saying I think the Bengals are going to go out there and win. I mean, Big Ben might have a trick or two up his sleeve. But yeah, Joe Burrow's in a very good situation against the Steelers. Carson Wentz, if you guys saw my sleeper picks video, also in a good situation against the Tampa Bay Bucks. I expect Tampa Bay to come out, be relatively dominant in this game. So as a result, somebody like Jonathan Taylor to get a few less carries, somebody like Carson Wentz to have to play from behind. So you like to see that there. It's also relatively cheap. Cam Newton, also a relatively cheap option you can go to. Has a ton of rushing upside, but just like a Jalen Hurts, kind of hard to stack. So I don't have a ton of him. He's at least in my player pool, mostly as a one-off. Down here, Mac Jones. A lot of people are going to him just because of the matchup with this Titans team. I mean, they're absolutely horrible, but I expect the Titans to play a lot better today than people expect. I mean, I think Hilliard's going to have a huge day for them at running back. So I'm a little bit cautious there in Mac Jones. Tyrod Taylor, I talked about him during my value picks video. He's an excellent value on the slate, somebody who's going to go out there, give you rushing upside, also has been relatively efficient through the air. You have tons of cheap options to stack with him. You mean Amendola, you can go to Burkhead. You also have people like Brandon Cooks that are projecting as one of the best plays in terms of points per dollar on the slate. Overall, just Tyrod Taylor is very easy to fit into lineups. Unfortunately, though, coming in with the ownership, you can see nearly 7% ownership. As of right now, I'm avoiding Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, at least in GPPs. He's coming in actually closer to 10, even 11% ownership as the last run that I had. This was as of last night, and he's just getting more and more popular. People are talking about him, as people are running their lineups. I think they're realizing how easy it is to get him into lineups. In cash, I absolutely love him. I think that he's going to pay off that salary more often than not, probably 8 or 9 times out of 10. In GPPs, does he hit 25 to 30 fantasy points? Probably about once or twice, maybe at most out of 10. I'd have to take a look at the actual sims to give you exact percentages, but I'm assuming it's in that teens, maybe the high teens at the very best, probably low teens, more than likely for Tyrod Taylor. So even though the Jets are a relatively soft team against the pass, they're a little bit better than people would expect. So Tyrod Taylor, I think you need to take it scenario by scenario. If you're playing cash, great play. Could not argue with you there. In GPPs, you really got to make sure that you're differentiating elsewhere, right? So if you're playing Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, you're probably going to be funneled into some of those stud options. So making sure that you perhaps, rather than going in and taking Christian McCaffrey, who's going to be super chalk, right? You're talking 20, maybe 25% ownership. Go ahead and take somebody at the top like Jonathan Taylor, who's actually coming in with lower ownership now because of the matchup. People have, kind of considered the line, maybe Jonathan Taylor doesn't get 30 rushes in a game where the team's playing from behind. Perhaps you pivot to him, right? That's a good way to play a Tyrod Taylor in a GPP. Because unfortunately for me, I like a lot of the chalk options up top. People like a Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, that kind of thing. So if I end up playing Tyrod Taylor, I get funneled into duping with like 50 to 100 people. So that's why I'm not playing him in GPPs. Just wanted to go ahead and elaborate there so you guys understood. And cash, I think he's a great play. In GPPs, if you have a more unique pool, go ahead and play him at quarterback. He opens up a ton of options. Just like somebody like perhaps even Matt Ryan could, a Cam Newton, which we've already talked about, or even a little bit less so Carson Wentz. All these guys are great options. And especially considering we have the rest of these options, I don't think Tyrod Taylor is as much of a priority, right? If you were dealing with not many injuries, not much value at the quarterback position, he would be a lot higher of a priority. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out there about him. Let's move on to running back now. Well, wrong thing there. Sorry about that. Here we go. Here are my running back projections, guys. And here at running back, you can see that I've kind of picked my spots a little bit more. There's a lot of guys marked as no. A lot of people that just aren't in my pool, guys that I'm not prioritizing, just because there's some good matchups this week and definitely some games with lower game totals that I'm frankly trying to avoid. So you can see Jonathan Taylor, we just talked about how I think he could be a good pivot up top, probably coming in closer to 15 or 16% ownership rather than the 22% we had last night. A lot of the industry this morning seems to be cooling on him. You've seen a lot of people pivoting to Christian McCaffrey, and rightfully so, in my opinion. Christian McCaffrey was by far my favorite play at the beginning of the week. You've just seen the public kind of come around to that. So it's not like Christian McCaffrey is a bad play. He's still going to be in my player pool, one of my favorite running backs to utilize. Just because I'm going to the more chalky running back, I'm going to have to make sure that at other positions, I'm being a little bit more cognizant about ownership. So let's move on a little bit. Najee Harris, a great play against the Cincinnati Bengals. You're using a Joe Burrow stack. Perhaps using Harris as a run back is a good idea. Dalvin Cook is being completely overlooked. I haven't really heard anybody talk about him this week. This San Francisco Vikings game is actually a little bit of a higher total than you'd expect. It's ranking as a top 4 total on the slate. I think that could be a little bit of a sneaky option to target. As of right now, I don't have many Vikings in my pool, and to be honest, that's a little bit scary. That's a team that's a very concentrated offense. They love to give it to their stars over there. The more and more I think about that, the more and more I get worried about it. And after we get off the live stream here, it's probably likely that I do put in some of those Kirk Cousins stacks. And maybe not even Kirk Cousins stacks, right? Maybe I'll just take parts of that game. I'm much more likely to take a Dalvin Cook, take a Justin Jefferson, or Tyler Conklin, just sprinkle them in here and there, just in case one of them goes out and has a massive game. Saquon Barkley, he's questionable. I expect him to play. I also expect him to have an increase in his workload. So not getting much ownership, which you have to like. You have to like the matchup as well. All of that makes him a good GPP play. James Robinson, actually one of my higher owned plays on the slate. I have 40% James Robinson right now. Great matchup against the Falcons. He's getting a ton of usage. Just really nothing to say that's, a negative here. He's getting the usage, has the efficiency, he has the matchup, he has the price tag that we're looking for. And frankly, he's not as owned as he should be. This should be a guy that's projecting for about 20% ownership, coming in right around 10 to 15%, depending on where you look. Really like that. Aaron Jones, as of right now, haven't projected as in. The best part about it is that his counterpart, AJ Dillon, is priced right below him. Unfortunately, I'm kind of hoping that, Aaron Jones would have been rolled out. That way we would have known that AJ Dillon was the only back who's going to be getting all the carries. Because if Aaron Jones starts, I'm not really sure what the workload is going to look like. He's obviously the alpha back there. Whenever he's fully healthy, he's getting about an 80-20 split between the two. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes Dillon gets a little bit more involved. But with the injury, it might be 50-50. Right? He might put him out there. Passing downs might have AJ Dillon be the real workhorse running back in terms of the rushing production. It slightly worries me. I actually, right before we got on stream here, took Aaron Jones out of my player pool. I actually was that spooked about it. I was just not, I did not like that idea. So I'm going to have to reconsider that. I talked about Aaron Jones earlier on in the week. The more and more thought I gave to that, just the scarier it looks. So we'll have to see about that. If Aaron Jones ends up being ruled out, we'll go ahead and talk about this right now. The stipulation is that AJ Dillon becomes one of the best plays on the slate. So I almost want to just put AJ Dillon into my lineups. And if Aaron Jones ends up being rolled in, just late swap, right? Take AJ Dillon out and late swap. So I'm thinking that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I mean, we do have some late swap options, not particularly at running back. Probably going to have to swap down to one of the cheaper guys that we have playing a little bit later and pay up elsewhere. Let's keep moving down at running back. Not that many more guys that are in my pool. Elijah Mitchell, if he plays, is a great play against this Vikings team. Again, I expect that game to be a little bit overlooked. I also could see it being a little bit of a shootout. Myles Gaskin, he's just a little bit underrated in my opinion. He's always just a little bit underpriced. He's getting a little bit more ownership than I'd like, but I still have sprinkles of him in my pool. I think he has high upside. Somebody that I have a lot more of an investment into, Miles Sanders, I have in half my lineups. That tells you how bullish I am on him. I expect them to have a very good game against the Giants, that being the Eagles. I have him projected for relatively low ownership, which I don't really understand. And as we've seen this season going on, we've seen him get more and more usage. We've seen him get more and more efficient. And really, this is one of the best rushing the offensive lines in the entire NFL. Sorry, my phone was going off there. They're very efficient. They have some good bodies up front. I mean, a lot of money into that offensive line as well. So it shouldn't really be surprising. So Miles Sanders should get some good games going forward, particularly if they start utilizing him more like they have over the last few weeks. Dontrell Hilliard has really popped up towards the end of the week. Obviously, Adrian Peterson was cut. And in reality, I do think he's actually the number one running back here. A lot of people are trying to tout other guys in that backfield. I'm saying it should be more of I guess a timeshare. I don't really see that. Hilliard's been by far the most efficient back in that backfield. And last week, particularly in the second half, was getting the bulk of the carries. And really, I think that's indicative of what we expect to see going forward. And this Patriots team, they're good. There's somebody that I talked about before the season as being a potential winner in that division. And obviously that's coming to fruition right now. I don't think they're as good as people are giving them credit for. Just a few weeks ago, people thought that they were a cupcake matchup, and now they're 7-point favorites against the Tennessee Titans. And sure, I get it. They're without A.J. Brown. Obviously, Derrick Henry got hurt a few weeks ago. The Titans have still beat some really good teams, and one guy isn't going to completely change the outlook there. Are they really 7-point favorites or the Titans? I'll leave you with that question. Ty Johnson right here against the Texans. The only problem here is that he's on the Jets, right? This Jets team is going to get blown out, I'd say 40, 50% of the time. And in those type of game scripts, he's almost useless. But the thing is, when this team's competitive, Ty Johnson's going to have a very good situation to thrive. So I have him in 40% of my lineups right now. He's one of my highest owned running backs on the slate. If you guys can't tell, I'm being really aggressive at the running back position. 4 guys over 40% ownership. Really just sprinkling in a couple other guys. At wide receiver, taking a little bit more of a scattershot approach. But Ty Johnson's one of the guys I am taking a stand on. I do see a lot of production for him in a positive game script. The issue is we don't know if that game script is going to come to fruition. I mean, Zach Wilson's back. There's people debating whether that's a positive or a negative for that offense. I personally think it's a positive, right? I mean, just using logic, this guy was a top 5 pick. He's extremely athletic. He has a very good arm. I'm sure he's young, but just long-term, we know that it's a positive for the offense. Ty Johnson could be a very interesting prospect. He's going to give you PPR production. He's not a stranger to catch balls out of the backfield. Also has been extremely efficient per rush. He's very fast, very powerful. Is a little bit overlooked as well. He's coming in with single-digit ownership, which I did not expect. But the guy being completely slept on, I don't understand, is Rex Burkhead. The guy had 18 carries last week. How in the world is nobody wanting to play this guy against the Jets defense, who, if there's any hole in that team, it's against the run. I mean, against the pass, the Jets actually have some solid guys in the secondary, but against the run, they're atrocious. I mean, you can see the worst team in the NFL. They're 32. So Rex Burkhead, if he's going to get 15 to 20 touches, if he's playing against the worst defense in the NFL, I don't care his name, go ahead and take the name out of there, right? A guy who's $4,200, he's playing the worst defense in the NFL, projecting for 12.8 points. You'd be all over this guy. You'd be playing 40% of them. So that's exactly what I'm doing tonight. I'm playing 40% Rex Burkhead. He's the last guy of all that bunch that I'm playing over 40% of. And I'm really trying to get value at this position. I think that's really where the value is today. And across the industry, people are talking about this position like there's no value, like there's no people to really plant your flag in. And anytime I see that across the industry, I look at that as an opportunity, right? People aren't going to be willing to take those stands this week. So if I go ahead and take those stands at running back, I can go ahead and play the chalk elsewhere. And quite frankly, I think the chalk at wide receiver is well warranted this week. So it gives me the opportunity to go ahead and do so. So let's talk about the chalk. We're not going to take too much time here because it's a no-brainer, right? It's the reason why it's the chalk. First off, Cooper Kupp, he's getting a little bit lower ownership than he should. He's actually only around 15% right now. Cooper Kupp is a slam dunk play. This guy's going to get you 25 to 30 fantasy points almost every single week. I expect this Green Bay versus LA game to be a little bit of an overlooked, perhaps a shootout in the making. So I love both these options, right? We're not going to talk about them more than that. They're the best 2 wide receivers in the entire NFL, and they're playing against each other. So yes, I have lineups where I have both of them in lineups together. You're able to make those type of lineups, particularly if you avoid Christian McCaffrey. Let's go down to the other 2 options I like here. Jamar Chase against Pittsburgh. I'm a Steeler fan. Again, I'll remind you guys, he's going to burn them without Joe Hayden. So he's probably going to put up 150 yards, 200 yards potentially. Slam dunk play. Mike Evans, great pivot off of Chris Godwin chalk. So that's why I'm going to Mike Evans. I think he projects right around the same type of projection, just with higher upside. This is somebody who has a lot more red zone usage, a lot more of a threat to go out and get you a 70 to 80-yard touchdown as well. Deontay Johnson, if you're going to play anybody from the Steelers other than Najee Harris, I think he's the guy to go to. He's been an absolute target hog, particularly since Juju Smith-Schuster is out of the offense there. It's a decent matchup. This Cincinnati Bengals team, you can see they're decent against opposing wide receivers, but in general, they tend to let up a lot of points, and Deontay Johnson is just a huge part of that offense. Let's keep going down. Chase Claypool, I like him as well. I mean, he's due to have a big game at some point. He has that kind of skill set. He hasn't really done that here in 2021. If he was having a good year, he'd be priced closer to $6,500, maybe even $7,000. So I like him at really low ownership. If he was garnering any type of ownership this week, probably wouldn't be there. But he's trivially easy to get over the field on. Brandon Cooks is chalk. So he's one of the chalky wide receivers I really liked. So he's why I tried to differentiate at running back, even at quarterback if I needed to. Brandon Cooks is going to get a ton of targets. He's playing a Jets team that, against a wide receiver specifically, they're actually a little bit worse than most of the other teams. So I like going to him. I think that he's in a relatively safe spot. Mike Williams is completely mispriced. If you guys saw my content earlier on in the week, you guys saw exactly how bullish I am on him. I don't think I really need to go into it, other than he's $5,700, and he was $7,600 just 4 weeks ago. Jerry Jeudy, T. Higgins, they're great guys to mix in. Both of them are in my player pool as of right now. They weren't priorities for me. That's why they're blank right there. But definitely people that I'm using in stacks. I have a little bit of Teddy Bridgewater stacks, so I have some Jerry Jeudy. And we already talked about Joe Burrow being one of my favorite targets. So I do have T. Higgins in some of those stacks. Tyler Boyd, also somebody I have in those stacks. Jacoby Myers, somebody who is due for touchdown regression. We saw him finally get his first touchdown in the NFL a few weeks ago. This Texans team is really bad against the pass. So if anybody's going to have success against them, if you're going to see anybody really go out and have a ceiling game, I do expect it to be one of the wide receivers for this team, not the running backs. Even though they are a run-first offense, this Tennessee Titans has a very stout front seven. You've seen that time and time again. Teams that run the ball, like even Jonathan Taylor had a little bit of struggle against them. Jacoby Myers is a solid option there. Van Jefferson Jr. love using with my Matthew Stafford stacks. He's just a little bit underpriced, a little bit underlooked. Don't really love this range right here. Just my opinion, guys that are a little bit overpriced. Laviska Shenault Jr., he's very athletic. He's a home run play waiting to happen. Good matchup against Atlanta. You can use him as a buyback for any Matt Ryan stacks. You can use him if you're using Trevor Lawrence. I won't be using Trevor Lawrence this week, but he, in theory, would be a good stacking option. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, I believe, is being completely slept on. He had 10 targets last week. 10 targets, didn't really catch everything. I believe he had 4 catches. That was all. Had over 100 yards and touchdown. So you like to see that. He was getting the usage that you're looking for. Tyler Johnson, because Antonio Brown's out, will see some usage. Finally sees a little bit of a price increase. So a lot of the public is off of him. But anyone in that Tampa Bay offense is capable of going out, putting up 20 fantasy points. So is in my player pool for that reason. Quez Watkins, home run play waiting to happen, is in my player pool, especially at low ownership. KJ Osborne, same exact type of play. I'm not going to repeat myself. And Danny Amendola, I'd say the lowest on the board at wide receiver that I want to go. He is $3,000, so you can't go lower than that. If Tyrod Taylor has a really big day, you can see Danny Amendola also have a very good day. He's not a sexy pick by any means, but he's the minimum, and he will be playing and starting for that Texans team without Nico Collins. Let's go ahead and go to tight end. All right, tight end is really ugly this week. So I'm going to go ahead and preface it with this before I get the screen up here. But I'm mostly using it in my stacks, right? So because it's kind of ugly this week, a lot of my exposure to tight end is just a direct result of some of my stacks. So you can see that this reflected with my ownership, right? Rob Gronkowski, Tyler Higbee, CJ Uzomah over there with somebody like a Joe Burrow, Jared Cook with Justin Herbert, who ended up being in my player pool. The only guy I'm really using as a one-off is George Kittle. So George Kittle is a huge part of that offense. Obviously, Deebo Samuel's kind of taken, the reins a little bit. He's kind of taken that number one role from him. I don't expect that to really be the case going forward. I expect their exposure to come forward. I expect it to even out a little bit, right? I expect it to stabilize. Deebo Samuel, the reason why we saw such inflated usage was most likely because Kittle was out of the lineup. Kittle's somebody that they're going to use in screens. They're going to use him as a setup blocker. Just overall, the offense really revolves around him. And when we saw him out of the offense when he was injured, they really struggled. So I really do like him there. $6,400. He's only $300 more than Kyle Pitts, and their projections are really close. You can see I have him projected higher. In terms of points per dollar, identical. So that's how close the projections truly are. Dallas Goedert, always going to be a good option for me. I love his red zone usage. I love the fact that he can go out there, get you those 2-3 touchdown games. And he's only gone better, right? And we haven't seen that blow-up game this year, which is a little bit surprising to me. Last year, he had a few really big fantasy performances, and that was before we saw a lot of this progression in his game, before he had, in my opinion, a better quarterback throwing to him. So we'll have to see when that comes around, and I want to be there for when it does, because he can put up some massive performances. I mean, 10 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, that kind of thing. He gets that kind of usage in a pass-heavy game script, and I guess that's why we haven't seen it, right? Jalen Hurts has been a little bit more rush-heavy to this point of the year. But when a team goes ahead and tries to take away that rush from him, he's going to have some passing opportunities, particularly over the middle. Because when you go ahead and try to take away the rush from Jalen Hurts, particularly the quarterback scramble, you have to allocate middle linebackers to do so. You have to take some of those linebackers that you're usually hoping to use against the tight end or other people in coverage and completely take them out of the play and cover the quarterback. And if they go ahead and do that, boy, oh boy, is Dallas Goedert going to have a massive day. So I'm just waiting for that to happen, guys. I'm going to be invested in him until that happens, because when it does, oh boy, it's going to pay off big time. Pat Freiermuth there at $4,300. Good matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. They tend to be a little bit susceptible to opposing tight ends, particularly in the red zone. Tyler Higbee, a great option with Matthew Stafford. CJ Uzomah, we already talked about it, great option with Joe Burrow. Jared Cook with Justin Herbert. Mo Alley-Cox, so he's perhaps a sleeper pick here. He's somebody who's going to see plenty of red zone usage for the Colts, but they've started to rely on Doyle a little bit more outside of the red zone, which is definitely concerning for him. But he's only $2,600. He's seen a price decrease because of some of the recent games. I do expect this Colts team to have to play with the passing game because they're playing from behind. I expect Tom Brady to just go out and light them up today. So Mo Alley-Cox could be somebody that gets some usage in garbage time. I like him there. And some of the guys I have down as blanks, so I'm not going to go through them in detail or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if any of these guys scored, from a Trami Temple to Mercedes Lewis, Drew Sample, Pruitt, all the way up to a Ferkser, Conklin, all these type of guys. They're not excluded from my pool. Probably have around 2 to 3% of all of them, just in case they go out there and score a touchdown, right? Tight ends extremely volatile. The production really comes down to that touchdown upside. And you don't really want to be trying to predict when that happens, right? You want to take the people that are in the best usage situations, the best matchups, that kind of thing, and try to approach it from that type of standpoint. Let's move over to the defense now. And defense, I have a relatively concentrated pool. Not a ton of people that I'm playing. Go ahead and share this here. And we'll be quick about defense because defenses are a crapshoot at the very best any week. Patriots defense I like against the Titans, obviously with a lot of the injuries that they're dealing with. Buccaneers as well. I don't expect the Colts to really win this game. I don't expect them to be as competitive as at least the Vegas thinks or a lot of the industry thinks. So I like going to them at defense. Eagles defense, you can see them have a very big day. They're an underrated squad in general. Also a decent price tag there at $3,200. This Panthers team against Miami, I also like. They're also underrated. They've been a top 5 defense to this point of the year. And Tua is an overrated quarterback, in my opinion. 49ers defense, I just like because they have a lot of talent on defense, a lot of speed. Also one of the lower-owned defenses on the slate. Same thing with the Titans defense. A lot of people are just expecting the Patriots to go out and light them up. And while the Titans have been horrible to this point of the year, it's not like Mac Jones is really putting up video game numbers or anything like that. And he's a rookie, so you go ahead and make some mistakes. Steelers defense, I'm a Steeler fan. That's all I'll go ahead and say there. I will be playing their defense. Jets, they are really good in terms of points per dollar. They're also relatively high owned. So, you're not going to really worry about your about your defense ownership. So you can go ahead and play them. Same thing with the Vikings, Texans, and Jags. All these guys, they're in negative matchups. We expect them to lose their games, let up quite a few points, but they're all extremely cheap. And anytime you have a defense, if they go ahead and score a touchdown, it doesn't matter if they lit up 30 points, that kind of thing. They could go out and still be optimal. So if you're going to take shots, I usually like to take shots further down the board at defense. I'm not trying to jam in any of these super expensive options because in reality, this $1,600 difference between, a team like the Texans and a team like the Patriots, that $1,600 can be much better utilized at wide receiver or tight end or even running back than it is at defense. You're dealing with a 6.8 point projection versus a 5.2, a 1.6 point difference, where at wide receiver, the difference between a $6,000 wide receiver and a $7,600 wide receiver, might be upwards of 7 to 8 fantasy points. So I'm going to go ahead and put that out there, guys. I love playing these cheap defenses. But that's all I've got here. I'm going to go ahead and go over this question before we get out of here. Tom says, thoughts on Tom Brady? So this is a lineup, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will go through it. Let me see. Thoughts on this lineup? It's a Tom Brady stack, obviously. It's utilizing Mike Evans, which I like, and Chris Godwin. And you have Robert Gronkowski. So only thing I'd say there, man, a three-way stack on the same offense. If you're playing smaller field stuff like single entry, could go ahead and pay it off. But if you're paying large field GPPs, three-way stacks don't work too often. I'd say about 2-3 times a year, you'll see a three-way stack win. Just kind of limits your opportunity. I would try to make it just 2. So perhaps taking, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, or Mike Evans or Rob Gronkowski, and taking someone else there. But cool, man. That's all we've got here for today, guys. If you have any questions and you're watching this on replay, as I'm sure quite a few of you will be, go ahead and put a question down in the chat. I'll go ahead and get to it when I see it. But good luck with all of your lineups, guys, and go Steelers.